Hello, everyone. Good morning. I think we have 10 minutes left. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to really talk about three concepts. Actually, the panel by Casey and Srikanth was a good segue into what I'm going to talk about. But the 60% startup, what we mean by that. I'm also going to introduce the concept of what we call the real Indian, what we mean by that, and a concept of local innovation, and how, if we get this combination right, we would have, as a country, created impact at scale. But before that, I wanted to talk about why, as a so-called impact investing firm, as Srikanth just pointed out, why we care about this. Two anecdotes, unconnected. Earlier this year, my uncle turned 77. So in true Indian style, calling him from Singapore, happy birthday, he said, thank you. And after the formalities, he said, I'm sorry. He said, I'm sorry and I'm embarrassed. I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And he said, I look back at my life and our generation has failed yours. I hope you don't do the same with the next. I look at India, 50 years of different governments, very poor infrastructure, not many changes, so much to be done. Very powerful statement coming from someone I respect. On the other hand, more recently, as a firm, we deployed over $1 billion in for-profit companies that create impact at scale and nonprofit organizations that are doing some wonderful work. We are lucky to have a single LP in Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay. And when we celebrated the 1 billion mark, he said, you know, it's taken us 10 years to get here. It's not fast enough. We need to do more. We need to move faster. We need to do this in our lifetime. I connected the two, and I thought about it. If we are to prove our model of creating market-based solutions that can create massive impact, India is that social innovation hub, right? Abject poverty, great entrepreneurial spirit, a development-oriented government, and humongous market segments. Combination is quite unique. Very few countries or even continents in the world can boast of something like that. That's why I'm going to talk about the 60% startup. So when you look at this as India's income pyramid, you can really break it into three segments. The top 5%, where high financial returns exist, but it's a very crowded market. The bottom 35%, very high social impact, but very hard to reach. It's this middle 60% that startups in India, if they serve efficiently, frugally, as Casey pointed out, can generate high financial returns and create massive social impact at scale. And this is the segment that we as a firm are most excited about. Now, I'll paint a picture of what this pyramid looks like. The global Indian, that's you and me, top 5%, we understand us, we relate to us. The needy Indian, the vote bank, the beneficiary, governments and foundations have done a very good job of informing us of who they are, what they want. But it's this real Indian that we know very little about. And as a firm, we are committed to knowing a lot more about this person. Most of you are entrepreneurs here. As a VC, I ask you, what is your problem statement? I'm going to give you 3 problem statements. The top 5% is trying to solve the problem of the next 60%. There is a problem of relatability. The second problem, we know very little about this real Indian, so about his aspirations, about his preferences, about his lifestyle, about where he spends his time. There is a knowledge gap. And third, a massive amount of people from this segment, millions of users, are coming online for the first time, And barring Facebook, WhatsApp, and YouTube, we know very little about their digital footprint. I call it the problem of hypothesis. And if we are to create thousands of 60% startups, it is about understanding this real Indian. I spoke about the challenges that exist in India, about how mass market utilitarian startups, that's how we define the 60% startup, that serve that middle 60%, but utilitarian. Casey is a brilliant example of that. Utilitarian, not hedonistic, need, not want, apparel, not fashion. So it's this combination of mass market utilitarian, very difficult segment, very unsexy. As a result, a lot of the startups today, and by virtue of my line of work, you will see mostly tech, beat consumer-related startups. That's where I focus my time on. But a lot of them are focused on that top segment and inverted the pyramid. And they've left a massive void, pun intended. And again, going back to the fact that if you believe that there is profit to be made in that middle, a lot of the growth is going to come from that middle, we need a lot more startups to focus on that void. As I said, as a firm, we're committed to understanding this real Indian a lot better. I'm going to try and share some of what we have learned, but I would say we are only scratching the surface. Falls in the income bracket of about 20,000 rupees a month to about a lakh a month. So that's the general sweet spot at which we operate. Lives in a rented home, usually with 3 or 4 members, but could also have left his rural home to go to the city and seek that dream. Rent, 15% of income, opportunity there. The breadwinner, very hardworking, usually 2 jobs, lots of time overtime, also willing to pledge his future earnings, borrow so that his family can enjoy a good life today, but also have a better future. Just like us, they want quality education. Casey spoke about how he wanted his children to go abroad. They want their children to have good quality education. Safe health, primary, and we have seen time and time again, they're willing to spend on this because they know it makes the difference. English aspirant, someone from Reverie Technologies told me most Indians are trilingual. They try to speak English. They understand and speak conversant in Hindi, but they're most comfortable in their local language. That's an insight. Savvy in adopting latest technology, but even for today, it's largely linked to just communication, voice, SMS, Facebook, WhatsApp, and entertainment, astrology, Bollywood, cricket, devotion, all of that manifests in the form of YouTube. Right? He's an active job seeker. A lot of us think that he's the micro entrepreneur. It's not by choice. He's an active job seeker. He's financial value oriented, cost oriented, but he's also family values oriented. I think it's that combination which is not too different from us, but we fail to understand the nuances. So before I talk about how the 60% startup can solve the real Indian, I want to take a little segue, detour into talking about the evolution of digital India and what we have done over the last 10 years. Really, this can be split into 3 phases. The first one, which is 2005 to 2010, what I call offline to online. Really, on the PC side, it was online travel and classifieds that ruled the roost, and on the mobile, it was value-added services. What did that phase teach us? It's about lots of people coming online for the first time. Trust is an issue. How do you build trust? Supply chains were broken, so virtual products and services were easier to deliver. That's why online travel and classifieds. But what it also taught us was that telcos were a beautiful way of reaching this audience in a low-cost way for acquiring customers, but also as a billing mechanism. the value-added services market also taught us that this real Indian that I'm talking about has the ability to pay. At its peak, value-added services was 8,000 to 12,000 crores for telcos, and they were largely driven by this real Indian. Next phase, I call it all about me. There were really two waves that emerged. Online shopping, everything around it, payment, logistics, and that grew exponentially. Convenience was the value here. And the other wave was social networking, chat, and video. Facebook, WhatsApp, and YouTube. It's telling how global tech products are able to understand not just the global Indian, but the real Indian much better than Indian startups can. And that's something we need to fix. The third wave, everything now, hyperlocal, on demand. What did it teach us? The full stack model was solving supply chain inefficiencies quite elegantly. Instant gratification is awesome, but not viable. So I think in all of this, we need to step back and see what we have done over the last 10 years. Facebook claims anywhere between 150 to 180 million monthly active users. WhatsApp and YouTube claim about 70 to 100 million monthly active users. 55 to 60 million online shoppers, 30 to 40 million classifieds users. But everything else is a big drop-off. Why? Because we don't understand that real Indian. A lot of the growth is going to come from that segment, and we need to understand them better. 2016, year of learning for most of us as VCs. We are different from the US. Every time someone asks me about Amazon and Flipkart, I ask them, where's AWS? Where's Kindle? Where are the drones? Where's Echo? We are years behind China. Living in Singapore, I can tell you we will never match the crazy spending patterns that the Chinese are capable of. We don't have the Chinese firewall. They will ensure that the local startup always wins. I'm not saying we should go down the same path, but we have to overcome that shortcoming. Lastly, India is a long-haul game. You have to think 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. There are no shortcuts. All the startups that tried to acquire short-term growth perished. And it's this combination that has made us realize that we probably missed a very important phase, which is the concept of local innovation. What do I mean by local innovation? It normally has 4 components. It's usually derived from understanding or a real Indian insight, something that's very unique to the Indian consumer. It's disruptive innovation, not copycat innovation. Porous is an great example of disruptive innovation, transforms other sectors. Establishes a frugal business model, usually in customer acquisition and delivery, and often hard to replicate. It's this combination that builds defensibility. It's this combination that Indian startups need to start thinking about in order to survive, but also scale and grow exponentially. Where have we seen this? In the offline world, QSR, retail, telecom, FMCG, financial services, health. We've seen this in all the other places, right? Nirulas, who doesn't want crispy pizza with cheese and capsicums? Beautiful insight. Bata, Sasta Sundar Tikau, beautiful insight. Fog, shake the deo spray. There should be more liquid, less gas. That's the Indian insight. Right? Very powerful stories, and 3 important components that come together. The offline, where this real Indian is, so they spend time understanding. Branding, invest in branding because they care about brands, they believe in trust, and they believe, and you have to establish a low-cost delivery network. Indian retail is amongst the lowest cost globally. So I'm going to give examples of local innovation that we as a firm have seen in the digital world. self-selection from our portfolio so that I can speak to it, but there are lots of other examples, and we can go on. But the first one is Indus. The vision is to become the OS for the next billion. What they do is to flash the Android phone, bake in features which are very, very Indian, and as you'll see, and as a result, work with a lot of OEMs today that want a differentiation from the Chinese. What was the insight? When they started, 80% of mobile users were feature phone users. Only 10% were actually English literate, and the internet was largely in English. As a result, there was very little usage. What did they do? Disruptive innovation. Built a keyboard with 14 languages, the way we learn the languages for the first time. Hybrid keyboard with English and Kannada plus English for the millennial. Text-to-speech in an offline world because bandwidth constraints exist. Transliteration, translation, a host of features. Disruptive innovation, very hard to replicate. They partnered with Micromax, Intex, Carbon, Cellcon, soon with the largest other entrant into the beast, and developed that low-cost delivery channel that I spoke about. Result, number 2 OS in the country behind Android, 6.3% market share, adding about 1 million to 1.5 million devices every month. Another case study, different real Indian, the small merchant, now floats. It's the platform for the small merchant. Insight, the small merchant also wants to come online, but he's not equipped. The real Indian wants to buy now, so there's local search was actually very high. And Google, because of its global product, lacked certain basic information that is required to make that match. What did they do? They created a very easy, simple to use, SMS-based come online platform, now an app as well. Real-time updates as a customer is searching for the merchant to offer discounts and compete, SMS or app, you choose. And then they created a RIA algorithm, which is an auto discovery of content as people are searching, which is very hard to replicate. And seamless connection between the consumer and merchant, transactions happen. The result, 130,000 merchants across 100 cities paying them every month for their services, 6 million consumers registering searches every single month. Very powerful, very hard to replicate. Another case study, travel companion, very interesting niche, Rail Yatri, most of us know ClearTrip, most of us know Make My Trip, Ibibo with the merger, where Rail Yatri, real insight, 2 million flight travelers a day, 40 million rail and bus travelers a day. No app to assist them, Indian Railways very opaque. Waiting makes them very anxious. Waiting for a confirmation of a ticket, waiting for a train, waiting to know if they'll get a berth, makes them very anxious. What did they do? They're the first to come up with a PNR predictor. The 98% accuracy can tell you whether you'll find 6 years of data on every single train that has run in the country. It'll tell you whether you can get a train or not. They created the first GPS for every single train in the country accessible by an Indian. Very hard to replicate, truly defensible. They partner with local train agents. They partner with bus ticketing companies to establish that low-cost distribution network where the consumer is offline as well. Frugal business model. Result, number 1 app in the train category, 3 million data points on ticket confirmations, 8,000 stations, that's the universe, fully mapped. They know exactly which train is running and how late it is. Very, very powerful examples. As a firm, we think about the impact as well that all of this innovation is creating. Right? And often it's because of the disruptive nature, it's transformational. It's disrupting an offline version. Here are some examples. Bus aggregation, likes of Shuttle, ZipGo, more local company, what do? They, real Indian insight is that they want a peaceful ride as much as we do from home to office. Why can't we do it in an affordable way? Budget hotels, they want a nice bed to sleep in when they travel. Home services, they take pride in wearing a uniform and being called a professional. All very powerful transformational ideas that are having massive social impact. So ingredients for success, some pointers. Local language, Daily Hunt, another portfolio company that I'm very proud of being associated with. Transformed news, non-English news publishing digitally. Transformed non-English books publishing digitally. And today, compete with YouTube in terms of time spent, in terms of page views, right up there with any other digital footprint there. Value for money, shop clues, brilliant real Indian insight. Competitive space, crowded, but the real Indian doesn't care about a brand. He cares about unbranded. Beautiful insight. Overcart, another of our portfolio companies. Why will I pay 100% for new when I can pay 75% for almost new? They call it unboxed. Beautiful insight. Financing options. Income streaming is a problem for them. Ability to pay is not a problem. So Zest, adaptation of models global, but at the time of purchase, you can take a loan, instantaneous, roughly between 3 to 5 minutes of approval, depending, and can take longer. But all of that in an online workflow. Neo growth, small merchant doesn't want to pay every month. He wants to pay daily and link to sales. Beautiful insight. First to come up with a merchant cash advance model in India. Online plus offline, I spoke about this. If you feel online is getting tapped, consider some offline exposure, but with a view to getting that consumer online. Lenscard, HealthCard, Pepperfry, some startups that are using that. We've heard these as complaints. What are the building blocks that are required? Connectivity, payment options, digital ID, simplified taxation. Bottom line, all of these are here. We should stop giving excuses, and we need to build for the future. As a firm, what do we look for? A transformational idea, deep understanding of the real Indian, a sound, often frugal business model, which is unit economics, viable, sustainable, profitable, but most importantly, a big heart. If you think you have those, come see us. Thank you.